Welcome. My name's Nick Hartgrave, and it's my pleasure to be MC for David's book launch today. So first, I'd like to introduce Talia Newland from AIA Publishing, who is David's editor publisher. Welcome, Talia.
Just being a small publisher doesn't mean that we're insignificant, because we actually have really a very good name in the indie world, and we are known for our excellent quality. I don't publish just any book. When he gave me the manuscript and I started reading, I was really impressed. He gave historical points in that book that it was just like an eye-opener for me. And this is where I think fiction can be so useful, because we wouldn't necessarily pick up a book on the history of the conflict, right? But when you've got a fictional book which is well researched and includes all this historical information in it, you learn so much. And because it's fiction, it has this human element. There's heart in the book. And I think it's actually quite a remarkable book, and it's a significant book because it will increase your empathy for both sides of the conflict.
Thank you, Talia. And Talia's company is well worth looking at. The AIA Publishing website, all the titles are there. Before we ask David questions about the book, he's going to give us a presentation of people and places.
And beside me was a friend that we got to know very well, and he's become a good friend over the years. But on that first visit, he said that he stood there just as a young boy with his father. And his father had survived Auschwitz. And it was his first time for both his dad and himself to be in the old city and to stand in front of the Wailing Wall. And of course, the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall, is the second most holiest site for Judaism. The Temple Mount, of course, is ranked number one. And my friend, whose name I've changed to Yuri, said that his father wanted to go and touch the wall, as you do, and to pray there, but couldn't make that final 10 metres. And he looked up at his dad, and he saw him shaking with emotion, and he'd never seen his dad cry. And he said, "Papa, why are you crying?" And his father didn't answer him. And Yuri said, "I was just too embarrassed to ask him." And it was much later in his life that Yuri found out what that tear, the terrible truth behind the tear. And so Yuri gave me permission after quite some time to put together his story, his dad's story. And so it blends with the events in the life of his family and also with his Jewish countrymen, the Palestinians. Also, there's a young Palestinian friend who he, amongst many others, said, "David, we don't want you to hate the Israelis. They're our brothers, but we want you to write your truth as you understand it." And his story, it's the story of his humiliation at a checkpoint, and it's word for word. I really have great respect for both sides of the war, the Israelis and the Palestinians.
How did you come to the conclusion that there was a book in that?
When I heard my friend, who we've called Yuri, when I heard his story, I thought, goodness, instantly, this story needs to be told. Here's a book.
Was there any particular part of the book that was particularly hard to write about?
The hard one, yeah.
David didn't vet my questions, so he didn't know what was coming, and as you can see, there's heart went into this book. When David was telling me that he had a novel as his second writing project, I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then he told me that it was set in Israel and it was about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. I thought, my goodness, that's an ambitious project to take on. How do you balance the story? Do you even try to balance the story? Do you think your professional background helped you to see both sides of this conflict?
Yes, I just imagined I've had 4 decades of having conflicted parties sit in front of me, and so it's almost as though I could, in the left chair was Israel and the right chair was Palestine. And And so the training that you do for relationship counselling is you've got to maintain your neutrality. Once you start forming an alliance with one side against the other, you know you're stuck. You know you're not going to make a difference because you're just going to perpetuate the situation. And so I really worked very hard to maintain that neutrality.
Seriously, I encourage you all to grab a copy if you would like to.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.